For those of you that have been following the last 2 days live, you'll realize that this is the final panel of the 2-day Centre Court Festival. Others, of course, will be catching this in the days and weeks to come. And as I promised our panelists, we like to save the best to last. It is a wonderful panel. It's lovely to welcome back Melissa Rapp, who's the Associate Dean of Graduate Admissions at the Goizueta School at Emory. Lovely to see you, Melissa. And you were saying earlier, you know, today is round one deadline day, and I'm sure your inbox will be flooded.
Yes, we're so excited. It's great to see all the candidates who we've been working with over the summer be ready to submit their applications, and it's just kind of the start of off to a great year. It's been really exciting to have students back on campus, so there's a lot of positive energy in the air right now. Really happy to be here with you.
I can imagine maybe it's an Anderson graduate that will come up with that application tracker like Santa and his presence. And that will help Alex Lawrence and his team. Alex is the Assistant Dean of MBA Admissions at UCLA Anderson. Great to have you with us, Alex.
Thanks, Matt. I'm glad to be here.
And we also have Maria Stutzman-Marquez, who is the Director of Graduate Recruiting and Admissions at the Mendoza School at Notre Dame. Maria, you were saying, you know, this is completing your first full year. And so, you know, to witness the sort of energy that Melissa was describing, it must be wonderful to have all of that incoming class joining you at Mendoza.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you, Matt, for facilitating. It's nice to meet you, Melissa and Alex. I think part of that is the spirit of inclusion that's happening on campus. Like there's definitely like a different mindset of the students, which is also really fascinating to witness.
Right. Well, I suppose as we look at those incoming classes, and Melissa, you know, we were sharing these Centre Court events last year with, you know, a great deal of uncertainty, people that were scrambling to put in extended deadline applications. I guess it's all been a little smoother, but, you know, tell me what you've been seeing, that there's some, you know, tremendous diversity numbers. I think, you know, record number of women that came into the Goizueta class. Talk a little bit about the class profile that you've just welcomed.
Yeah, you know, we have seen a real uptick in interest across the board, and that level, the number of candidates out there who are interested in MBA studies right now really gives a lot of schools the opportunity to increase the diversity in the classes. And that's always something that we talk about with great pride, because we know that diversity really makes for a more dynamic MBA experience. And so when we're able to put more different people in classes, that's where the magic happens. And so it's been really great to see more women, more underrepresented minorities, you know, more foreign nationals, all looking to be a part of MBA classes. And not just those demographics. I think we're also talking about industry diversity and having people come from functional diversity. And that too allows you to sit next to people who approach problems in a new way. And so whenever I'm looking at building a class, a lot of it centers on how are all these people going to, in equal measure, challenge each other and support each other.
Yeah, that's a good mix, and how those two go hand in hand. And I guess this idea of sort of, you know, crafting that diversity. I mean, Alex, application volumes really just tell part of the story, because as you look at those unique profiles, those distinct voices, you know, whether it's underrepresented minorities, whether it's, you know, first generation that's joining you at the school. Are you very excited with the intake that you've had?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, echoing what was said earlier, you know, when we look at this year's class coming in compared to the previous one, we all know sort of the challenges that the COVID environment did bring. So our class of 23, the most diverse class that we ever had, similar to what was described by many of us, I hope, many schools. You know, we had an increased number of women, underrepresented minorities, underrepresented populations in general. Our international numbers were up, again, echoing the same thing, seeing people come from a diverse and broad set of industries, job functions. One of the things I'm sort of really excited about too is that, you know, when you have, at least for us, especially being in California, where we didn't have the opportunity to have students come on campus last year, having that energy come back as early as the first weeks of August with a group of individuals, right, who are so excited to kind of get out in general and come into an area, a region like Los Angeles, and explore this great opportunity to, get a dynamic graduate degree, the MBA, right, that we all love and cherish, and at the same time meeting new people. So it's a lot of new adventures for a lot of the students that we've seen come on our campus and explore sort of like this new normal, right, for many of us, and exciting times for this population.
Right, we can't let them get too distracted with LA, because on campus with the clubs and there are so many different things going on. We'll talk about that perhaps in a few minutes. Marie, you talked about that sense of inclusion, and Alex was alluding to, after the challenge of the pandemic that had sort of put a dent in international applications, or even just the ability to then join you at the school, to then have so many different voices must be very exciting.
Yeah, it's actually, it feels really wonderful. I think for Mendoza College of Business, we've also seen increases in women. I think it's the largest percentage of women in the last 10 years. We are the largest in global diversity, with 29 countries represented, and we have a very small class size, typically around 120. And then that class size grew this year to 143, which I think kind of was like a bit, shocking at times, because we just didn't have that expectation. But the number of candidates who were really motivated, right, to be a part of a business school program was really impressive. And I think within that, what I'm hearing with all of us is I'm so excited that we have more women and underrepresented people who are working through these business programs, because we have so many complex issues that need solved, and we need leaders at the highest levels from many of these groups. And so it's very exciting. Yeah, the spirit is alive here, with people really wanting to support each other and help each other out and just really create those connections.
Right, it really is that sense of business as a force for good, isn't it? Melissa, we've with a very distinguished career in admissions, we've seen other economic downturns, and even as we look at last year, perhaps people thinking, business school, I'm not sure what else to do. Have you seen a shift in the last year, even as people have then been, slowly returning to the office, but saying, you know what? There's still something in me, this underlying need for change, and that's really emerged in the applications that you've been seeing?
We did see some of that, and I actually anticipate seeing more of it going forward. I think during the time of COVID, people spent a lot of time reflecting, and there were a lot of other things going on, and there continue to be a lot of, as Maria mentioned, really kind of heavy things that we're all looking at society going, we can do better. We there's this sense of we can do better and we have to do better. And I definitely see within our application pool, our students more and more are interested in social impact. We launched the Roberto Goizueta Center for Business and Innovation, which really looks at that intersection of business and society. And nearly all of our candidates at least want to hear about that and want to know how they can be a change agent, how they can leverage business to impact society. And so I do definitely see, it was certainly growing prior to the pandemic, but I think we're going to see quite an upswell in that as an important criteria for students as they look at programs, and for programs to deliver opportunities for students to really hone those skills that give them the confidence to become a business leader who does create change.
Right. Alex, from what you said earlier, we both love the MBA. Given the last year and a half and this enduring appeal, and then the positive outcomes of so many graduates, your colleagues, we're talking about so many career opportunities that they're now pursuing. Do you think it's just sort of demonstrated the intrinsic value of this opportunity to go back to business school, both the soft skills and the hard skills, the network, and the MBA perhaps has even more relevance than ever?
Absolutely. I think that for many of us, including the individuals that we're recruiting, saw through over the last year and a half plus, sort of like thinking about what values, what matters most to them, as well as seeing some opportunities, right? We've always kind of talked about students who get an MBA, get some skill sets, go in and disrupt industries, make organizations better. But I even think that for many of us, and even our students who are coming in, they've seen sort of like what matters most to me, as well as looking for organizations, if not creating my own, something that where I can make an impact, where I can have some balance, right? I don't need to necessarily have to go into a building and work however many hours as a banker, as a somebody who's in technology or management consulting or whatever it may be, and just kind of doing some reevaluation, even sort of from the standpoint of a lifestyle. So, but how do you get there? Going from point A to B, and you have all these ideas about what you want to do, taking some skill sets that you learn, and coming into a graduate program where you can, like you said, learn some soft skills, some technical skills. Of course, do that networking, looking for different opportunities as sort of like, maybe from a short term and as a launch pad for long-term career goals. So again, being one who has an MBA as well, is just like, I'm always going to be an advocate for exploring the opportunity, because it's probably one of the few times that you have a chance to kind of take a pause and again, sort of expand your horizons and get an opportunity to kind of stretch the limits of your goals, as well as sort of connecting with people who don't necessarily have the same background as you. And again, coming across, making friends for life.
Right. We've talked with your colleagues in careers about professional development and opportunities. But if we look at it at that personal development level that both of you have mentioned, Maria, a sense of purpose, it's not just about the next job and the paycheck that may go with it. Is it something that you feel you see more and more? Because of course, Mendoza, you shared with me some of the programs where students were working with ex-FARC guerrillas in Colombia and helping them in sort of transition to civilian life, so far beyond double entry accounting. Do you think that that sense of purpose is really, really present in this generation?
Absolutely. I think we're seeing that. I mean, with is it the Greta Thunbergs, with the sustainability and the climate change, and we see a lot of young leaders out there in the world, whether they're influencers in social media or they are actively building organizations that will address some of these issues that we see in healthcare and health inequity and the myriad of other areas, even in finance and how finance is changing, with mostly moving into fintech. And so I think. Yeah, and I think part of their response to that is, and I'm kind of diverting a little bit, because as a Catholic institution and having kind of this being a force for good at the University of Notre Dame, there is this inherent like values based. So it's something that I think we see that a lot coming in, and part of it are these experiential learning opportunities where you are able to really experience leadership through a consulting lens, using a McKinsey style consulting platform and foundational guide to really do this work, whether it's out of country or in country. So yeah, I think there is an opportunity there to really experience what it means to have a commitment to making a difference, rather than saying that and then not actually applying it in your experience. And I think we place heavy, and I know all of us do, we place heavy value on the leadership development that happens through the MBA program.
Right. So it's going to be another very busy year.
Yes.
And Melissa, I'd like to start with you as we roll up our sleeves and think about admissions advice for our viewers. I think that we should make it required reading for all Centre Court participants. An article that you authored that published on the Poets website a few weeks ago that looked at reasons for being admitted or denied. You had military Mike, and you had, what was it, perfect on paper Patty. Can we start there and really just summarize for the audience the sort of the key theme that you were then demonstrating, I think, in terms of, doing a great job of explaining, where business school fits versus someone that thought they had all the grades and the test scores, but it didn't really make sense.
Yeah, I mean, the article basically was, my goal was to reinforce to people who maybe still have some of that self-doubt or imposter syndrome that they really can do it. And the point was that we see every year this happens every year, it's happened at every institution I've been at. We see people who on paper, you would say slam dunk, admit that person, they're going to be great. And it turns out after we've interviewed them and interacted with them, they're not great. Their values don't align with the schools, or they're not interested in having an impact or really being a part of our community. And those are things that are really important to us. And so we pass on people who have outstanding test scores or great GPAs because we don't see a fit there for our program. And at the same time, there are plenty of people who, again, at first blush, you might think, well, I'm not sure. I think this person might struggle academically. I don't know, that maybe they're a little awkward, who knows? But then once we have gone a little deeper, and that's why all of the programs have I know when you're an applicant, you might be like, why are there so many parts to this? Why do I have to submit so many pieces of an application? Why is there such a process, including an interview? But it's because in order to have that transformative experience that we all talk about, we have to build the right type of community. And so there are people who don't look all that strong based on some stats, but what they bring in terms of leadership and engagement make me forget all those other things, make me want to put them in the class. And so each candidate has the responsibility to reflect on their own story and highlight how they're going to add to the class. And again, to bring it back to diversity, we need all those different kinds of people. We need the leaders, we need the strong academics, we need the really thoughtful but quiet people. There's sometimes this feeling that everybody in an MBA program is, such an extrovert and really outgoing, and I'm never going to fit in. There are plenty of quiet, introverted people as well, and they bring a lot of value too. So I just want people to understand that there is no perfect candidate, and you shouldn't try to be a perfect candidate. You should be the best candidate that you can be.
So Alex, where do you and your team start? As big picture, just trying to get a sense of the individual in front of you on paper, as I had described in the article. Where do you like to begin puzzle?
And I'm sorry, I didn't hear you saying, where do we like to sort of start engaging?
Yeah, where do you like to start, just to get that first sense of the candidate that's in front of you?
Oh, sure. So, I know that sometimes some people dive into the essays, some people sort of dive into, say, letters of recommendation. I myself, I like to start looking at, say, the resume. And many times, I'm looking at the resume, not necessarily for where you work, but a lot of times some of the best resumes, they'll tell a story all on its own. It'll talk about a person's journey. Many times that'll have the academic institution where somebody would have graduated from, maybe even that first job or position after they graduated. But then in that storyline, it just kind of shows the progression. It shows sort of maybe some of those transitions as that individual is starting to find, maybe what matters most to them from a career standpoint. But then also on that CV or resume, there'll also be hobbies and interests as well. So it'll kind of give like I won't say a complete picture of who that individual is, but then that starts, at least for me, some of those creative juices. I'm starting to get excited because, again, like what was mentioned earlier, that we're not necessarily looking for people just to sort of be just excel in the classroom, right? Just be sort of bookworms or just great on academics. That's important, but we want at UCLA Anderson, we want individuals who will excel in the classroom, but also contribute to our community in a variety of different ways, making the campus better, participating in student clubs, student government, starting conferences or leading conferences, engaging with the community overall. And that, whether that be on the UCLA Anderson campus, UCLA, or even the broader business community here in Southern California. And, like was mentioned earlier by my colleagues on the panel, fit is important. What we may see on paper, whether it be test scores or grades, that's not necessarily the entire complete picture. So having a CV, also interviews, letters of recommendation, that kind of helps us get that holistic review on a candidate. But like I said, personally myself, I dive right into the resume just to kind of get a good sense in general of who I may be sort of exploring as I start to read the other parts of the application.
And given some of those self-confident, outspoken extroverts that we all imagine fill the MBA class, and as Melissa said, those quiet ones, just as interesting to listen to. Sometimes there's the anxiety, well, MBA leadership, I need to capture on this resume the sort of leadership, but my job title doesn't speak to that. Are there good ways, Alex, that they can, you can dig deeper and show just different ways of leadership that may not have been captured in your current role?
Yeah, absolutely. So, it's not always about like having, say, promotions in the workplace or the next job, but, that's why we dig deep in terms of like whether it be in the interview itself, where you get a chance to explain some of those leadership opportunities that you may have exhibited, whether in the college or maybe some other extracurricular activity as you participate from the community sense that I mentioned earlier, so that you can kind of showcase those leadership qualities. Because again, we know that, you spend probably a majority of your time Monday through Friday in the workplace, and there may be sort of limited opportunities. But then again, that kind of goes back to my point that we're not looking for people who are, say, one-dimensional in that sense, all work, no play type of thing. We want people who have that balance and commitment to something that they love, and they're not just necessarily doing it for just application purposes. Because trust me, through our own sort of review process, and including like the interviews that I mentioned earlier, we're going to be asking about things. We're going to be looking for that evidence. So the essays, the data sheet, the letters of recommendation, the resume, all of that should come through very naturally, and it shouldn't be necessarily, forcing, or you're trying to figure out how can I show this. It should just really flow through.
Now, a bullet point, Maria, can have lots of bullet points, but there are lots of white spaces in a resume. Is that where a recommender can really then share the sort of insights and perspectives, perhaps about, what makes a person tick, what drives them, their value system, that really then provides great value to you in the admissions team to get a better sense of the individual?
Yeah, so I think with the letters of recommendation, I think, one of the best things about asking somebody to review is that it's typically somebody that you really trust and have worked with for a number of years. And so you're asking them because you believe you would get a good review. So that's the positive thing, is the bulk of the reviews are quite good. And so when we're reviewing them, we're really looking for some of those micro like vignettes or so that tell the story about the character and the work performance of a candidate. And so they're always interesting to read. And I think that part of that is learning a little bit more about the candidate. And I think for many, if this is somebody that you really, as a supervisor or somebody who's been a mentor or somebody who you've worked with for a number of years, they will, in fact, kind of highlight many of the same traits that we may have seen come through in those subtle nuances within the essays, or maybe come through within the resume or the interview. So we're looking for that alignment along the way.
Applicants to Goizueta, they have until, what did we say? It's until midnight tonight, I guess, Melissa. They're leaving it a little bit fine if they're going to send in, if they're watching us now and they're going to send in the application in the remaining hours of the day. Then, of course, they cross their fingers for an interview. Now, talk us through, because I think it speaks to your earlier point of just from paper, really bringing that person alive, whether you use with the team, alumni. How does it work? And what is it that you really hope to capture about that individual?
In the interview itself? Yeah, so we actually offer candidates to also have to do a video essay for Goizueta. So we do get a chance to see everybody. Everyone on the admission committee has a chance to have sort of an interaction with people face to face. But in the interview itself, a couple of things. I do want to let people know that if a school is invitation to interview, we are probably inviting people for several weeks. So if you would submit your application on the deadline day and you don't hear 2 days later an interview, do not panic. Give us a little space to do some work, because we do go through a process of reviewing those applications and inviting people to interview. And that goes on for several weeks. And then during the interview, I think of it as a two-way conversation. We definitely are looking to learn more about you. And as Alex mentioned, It's a great time to either highlight or flag certain aspects of your experience that you think are particularly relevant. It's also a great time to share a news story. It is always a little disappointing if you get into an interview and you see the same material used again that was already used in the application. Everybody should have kind of an abundance of different examples. And so we'd love to hear something new about you. But it really is your opportunity. We know that not everyone is as good of a writer. And so giving everyone the opportunity to, in their own words, tell their story is really important. So it's really about you being able to give us a glimpse into you. And we're going to, again, be looking at, why are you interested in our school? What do you hope to bring to our program? But it's also a great chance for candidates to ask questions. And I don't think candidates should be afraid to do that. I think they should be prepared to, ask a question that's going to help them gain some kind of insight. So whether that's an industry specific question about maybe where you want to go into, or a club specific question, that is also an important part of that interview process. It's more of a conversation. So I always tell candidates, don't get too stressed out about it. You made it over the big hurdle. Let's just have a chat.
Take a breath, be yourself.
Absolutely, be yourself for sure.
Yeah, perhaps to provide some reassurance, Alex, Anderson, as with other schools, every year you'll publish a class profile, and it sort of reinforces, lots of smart, talented individuals that are joining you in the program. Look at that average GPA. Look at those average test scores. I mean, if you actually published that the average height was 5'5" or 5'11", people might be nervous that they're taller or shorter than the incoming class. So stepping back from that, because that really just captures the range of individuals, and people really shouldn't be sort of caught up on 10 points on a test, or how they fit with that profile. It's much broader than that.
Yeah, absolutely. When I always tell people too, you hit the nail on the head there, that you see these numbers, and I always tell people, look at the ranges, because trust us, I think we can all say on this panel and all the top schools that we've seen candidates with just numbers off the chart and may not necessarily have admitted them initially, if at all, and then we've seen some people with lower scores. So we're looking for strengths in other areas, if that may be the case. So people who may be a little bit lower on the test score range, they're bringing some other stronger attributes, but we want to see the best qualities about a person in all different areas that we're collecting that information. So, like Melissa mentioned, maybe somebody's not as strong as a test taker or a writer or things of that nature. Again, we're still looking for people to excel in those areas, because, going to business school is not an easy thing to do, right? You're going to be surrounded by some very talented people. And I think, especially at UCLA Anderson, that's what we're looking for, a diverse set of individuals who are going to be bringing those stronger qualities, maybe that others may not necessarily possess, but then you're learning from others just as much as they're learning from you. So when we put people in learning teams, we have people who may be great at crunching the numbers. We may have someone else on the team who is great and wants to do the writing, and someone else who's great on the oral skills and communications, and it just loves doing the presentations and all that. So again, if people, when they see these numbers on our websites and they're like, whoa, man, they sort of get a little bit apprehensive, go way beyond that, and really understand what the schools are looking for in the application. So when it comes to the essays, make sure you're answering the essays. If they're asking you to submit a certain number of letters of recommendation, get the best ones that you possibly can that are informative, and all the other parts of the application, like I mentioned, that you want to make sure that when you click the submit button, you're ready. So it's not like, okay, I just woke up and I'm just going to take this test without any preparation, or I'm going to give the person who writes my letter of recommendation a week to write it. Put yourself and other people who are going to support you in the best position possible to make sure that all the materials are top level.
Right. A panel like this reminds me, all three of you signed up in your careers to focus on admissions and finding those positive qualities, those great reasons to admit individuals. None of you want to be rejection officers. It's all about, being able to identify and how a candidate can share. Maria, with all of that, people are thinking about, well, financing the program, scholarships. A scholarship something that you look with in parallel with the application, or something that you then turn to when you've made decisions? How does it work at Mendoza?
Yeah, so we're changing our system from in a couple of ways. I think we were delivering and rewarding students at the time of their admission. And now we're moving to more of a need blind or award blind approach. So we review all candidates and their applications, and then we decide whether we'll admit them. And then we have another committee that will look to the scholarships. And I think that this really helps because it takes a little bit of the pressure off in the moment of admission, and it allows us to see the broader base of candidates that we're admitting by round. And I think that creates a bit more equity through the process, especially if we're solely looking at fellowships based on merit, right? And so we're also piloting a need-based option for students as well for the scholarships. This is not normally done, I think, at the graduate level, but if somebody would like to qualify for a need-based fellowship along with merit or instead of merit, they can provide us with they would have to complete the FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid, and then complete a short essay as to why they're requesting it based on need. And then we'll review that as well during the fellowship awarding. So we're hoping that this is a great opportunity and option for students who may fall into less of a merit-based and may also qualify for need. So yeah, we're looking forward to that, but it has changed, and so I'm excited to see what comes of it.
Melissa, with your experience, let's sort of go back, whatever the right time frame is, 3, 5, 8 years, and an individual where you looked at their application and you said, yeah, there's something special there, and perhaps you even took a risk on that person, and then you see them coming out of the program, things that they've done 3 years, 5 years later. It's like, yes, that's what I saw. I mean, does that happen? Do you get to see that sort of arc and the progression?
Oh yeah, it's the best. It is like one of the true joys of this career, that there's two things that I love. One, I get to say I'm still in college. Like, I never had to leave the college atmosphere to, be on campus and all of the things, the rich environment, and almost to a person. When MBAs walk across the graduation stage, they say to me, it went so fast. And I'm like, yeah, and I get to stay here for another, I just get to keep staying. And so you get to enjoy this cycle of new students coming in. And I don't even have to wait for them to get into their first job afterwards. We can start to see their development very quickly. I mean, at most schools, I think the onboarding process plus the first semester of classes is a lot. And you can just see the students start to process that information and apply what they're learning in the classroom to experiential opportunities that they're given outside of the classroom. And you can hear them start to have this confidence about, now I get it. Now I understand how to have a seat at a table where real decisions are being made and how to account for all the different areas of a business. When I did my undergraduate, I only understood a portion. I focused on, engineering, or I focused on supply chain. But now I understand marketing too. And now I understand finance, and all sorts of things have opened up to me. And you just get to see that compound. They go to their internships and they come back to campus, and the energy that they bring, having had this new experience. And then when they get into their first job, it's one of my favorite things to host an alumni panel with recent alumni and ask them, all right, so what are you still using? And they're like, oh, let me tell you, I applied this framework in this problem and my boss thought I was a genius. That is just one of the very best things about being in admissions.
Right. Yeah. No. And the way that you describe it, well, it just speaks volume about the joy that you bring to your work. Um, Alex, perhaps in applying to Anderson, I'm thinking, how am I going to show the school you're highly selective and that I really want to come here? So paragraphs 8, 9, 10, I just list all of these electives. There are so many that you offer, or I've memorized every page of the website. But I mean, truly, to be able to demonstrate the sort of fit that you described, or just that a candidate has really taken the time at a very personal level to research, what would you recommend, to find out what makes Anderson so distinct and the right fit for a person?
Yeah, sure. So, it all starts with sort of that research, right? Like even the people who are on today's call who may not have had UCLA Anderson on their radar before, right? So it's that research part. But what does that mean? It's like taking it to, say, the next level, So like you're saying, for us, when we're reading applications, and the ones who have definitely thrived here at Anderson are the ones who've taken the time, like you say, and connected with different resources or people that are willing to speak or connect with you. So it's really, if you have an interest in, say, real estate, we have student ambassadors who, and that's again at the core of our DNA here of our UCLA Anderson students, they want to give back, they want to pay it forward. So they want to talk to you about why they chose Anderson, all the resources and experiences they had to date, what their plans for after they graduate. And then you have, on the same level, you have faculty, who are in those areas who are just like, yeah, send me an email. Being a public school, all our contact information is out there, so reach out, and do the research, connect with the people, read the stories. One thing I would say is also go to our website. Lots of great content, things that you can, say, digest on your own at your own convenience and kind of see, what's the day in the life of a student at UCLA Anderson, how to apply successfully. Some tips. And then at the end of the day, once you start figuring out what you want to do with an MBA degree, what kind of experience you want to have, then you start plugging into sort of like some of the nuts and bolts about like, okay, how do I apply successfully? I've heard from all these different people. I've seen some of the arc or the trajectory of people who have succeeded at the UCLA Anderson School. Then you can start looking at what have alumni done, but then more importantly, you start connecting with the admissions staff, whether it be through recruiting events or events like this one. We're hosting these all the way through all the rounds. So through early 2022. So I say that there's lots of great sort of free resources for people to check out, and again, in a non-pandemic era, walk on the campus, see that, I have to tell you, Matt, because with all my colleagues here on the panel, when we were flying all over and around the world, right? Some people didn't have the opportunity to kind of visit our campuses, but, getting the opportunity to come on UCLA Anderson campus. And like I said, I'm a big advocate of saying, like, just don't think about sort of the 2-year experience, think beyond that, think about what your experience will be like as a family member of UCLA Anderson, but think about also like what those 2 years are going to look like going to a school, big metro city in an area that maybe you're familiar or not familiar with. All those things are part of the research process. And then trust me, what you'll find is that you're like, wow, I have all these ideas going through my head. How do I put this on paper? Take that time to, put together, like I mentioned before, a competitive package so that it all makes sense to you. And like my last piece of advice is that, if you have the opportunity and time, if it's an essay or other parts of the application, put it in front of somebody who knows you well. Does the essay make sense? Is it answering? Is this, who I am, versus trying to write for what I think the admissions people want to hear. And for Anderson, people who apply successfully, that's exactly it. They're writing within a good sense of who they are. Their whole application just makes sense. And we're looking forward to them being a part of the Anderson family.
If Maria, if we organized one of those alumni panels that Melissa so enjoys, and they said, I wowed my boss with something that I'd learned on the program. So if I sat down with 2 or 3 Mendoza graduates and I said, what are 2 or 3 things that really were the hallmark of the experience, or where they felt that it had the greatest impact on them? Would there be a consistency? Would everyone have a different response? What sort of things do you think they would share with me?
Yeah, I've had even during the pandemic, we've had some opportunities to hear from our alums, and the consistency there is joining a group of people who have very similar values, and so that whole community feel is really important. And there's the Notre Dame family, I think, is a part of that. I really liked how Alex said that, pre-admission, are you thinking about what this community is going to look like beyond your 2 years here? So really looking at the alumni and the alumni base and kind of what that means for you long term and the legacy of your family. So that's one. I think the other piece of that is the closeness between faculty and being able to really learn from faculty who are doing research, but also practitioners, and the, I guess, access to faculty generally, being able to beat them for office hours, or even be a TA or a graduate assistant in some of the work. So some of those opportunities there I think are really helpful. All of us across our programs have thought leaders in the space, so really being able to dive in and attend like speaker series, and then utilize like I guess the faculty across the different graduate programs across the university. So I think I'm speaking about the Mendoza faculty, but also just more broadly across the university. And then I think, and I'm assuming that most people would say this across all programs too, but it's the peer-to-peer relationships that are built in that moment, and kind of the unique interactions and like interpersonal skills that you're developing within your learning teams as you're trying to figure out who is the facilitator and who's the person who's most quantitatively capable, and managing those nuanced relationships and really growing as a person. So that peer-to-peer connection. I want to say football is maybe like a high third place in there because, but yeah, I would say those are the top three.
Great. Well, as we wrap up, and with everything that you've learned in the last 18 months, Melissa, we began the panel looking at the tremendous diversity that all three schools have attracted, and perhaps even how, as we've adopted virtual platforms, you've been able to connect with individuals in parts of the world that just weren't available, or an opportunity with the travel schedules that you used to have. So round one has gone, unless you really are determined. But as we start to think about round two, and just those that are determined to apply in the 2021-2022 admission cycle, with all of the initiatives that you and the team have taken, what would your advice be in terms of reaching out to any of these three schools, the events that you have, and just being able to give them that sense of, this is going to be a great place for me?
Yeah, and this is a common theme on all the panels I've ever spoke on, the idea of fit and finding the right community and finding a place where you don't just want to get through business school. It's not something you want to survive. It's something you want to thrive in, and you need to find the place where you'll have the opportunity to thrive. And so understand that admissions teams really love interacting with candidates. We love getting to know them. We love supporting them. I actually keep in touch with some candidates who went to other schools, because it isn't about picking my school over Alex's or Maria's. It's about finding the right fit for you. And that's what we're passionate about. And so take advantage of, when I say Goizueta does one-on-one consultations, if that's appealing to you, schedule one. If you want to email us and you're web savvy enough to find Alex's email, he will answer you. So would Maria, so would I. This is what we do. We do it for a reason. We all could have had other careers, and so could all of everyone on our team, but we're doing these events to help you. We want to help you, so take advantage of them. I also don't think any candidate should overlook the power of LinkedIn and using the LinkedIn advanced search feature to find alumni who they can really connect with and learn from based on industry or location or where you want to end up. It's also a great measure. Community will be like when you're an alum. Do I get answered? Am I getting the responses I hope to get? So take advantage of all of the things that schools offer. Check out our events pages, use our websites. Think of us as your team. We all want to see you get this MBA that we all love. And we just want you to find the right school. for you?
Of course, the cat is out of the bag, and now many thousands of viewers will know that they can find Alex's email address. But all three of you, the commitment, just the warmth, I don't know, all three of you just share and emanate this passion for what you do. It's lovely for me as your host to witness that, and I think I speak for the viewers in terms of being extraordinary ambassadors for your schools. This has been a lovely way to wrap up 2 days of a very full Centre Court MBA Festival. I hope that for all of the viewers, whether you're watching this with us live or you're catching this later, take Melissa up on that. Reach out. Clearly, this is what they themselves thrive on. Alex, Melissa, it was a lovely way to bring the festival to a close. Thank you to all three of you, and for all of the viewers, good luck with your next steps. I think we've had such a convincing case in the last 2 days of everything that the MBA has to offer at that personal and professional world, and maybe we can all play a role in making the world a better place. So thanks for a great panel, three of you.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you, Matt.